Everybody. I hope you're doing well. I haven't put up a video in a while, but this particular one has been kind of, I feel my guides kind of like pushing me, and kind of keep bringing it up. So that's always a sure sign. That's your guides if it keeps coming back, whether it's an idea or a thought or whatever. If it keeps returning, that is your guides repeating, saying, listen, do something. Um, this is a story. So this is the story about the first spirit that I ever saw with my eyes. Um, I've told this story a lot. I've told it on my channel. I've told it on other podcasts because it was such a profound experience. But I wanted to tell it today with a little bit of context around it because there are a few things that happened within that experience as well. Because the first spirit I saw that I could see with my own eyes was my dad. And I saw him in my room the night before his funeral. So first of all, I was still in the church when he passed away. I was at 30 and I had Cassie and she was about a year and a half. And how old was she? Maybe yeah, she was about a year and a half. And I was singing. I was singing. Um, so and this was also where I had my first premonition that I put together was a premonition. Wasn't till later that I understood it, but at the time, I remember thinking how weird it was. So I'm going to start there, but I'm going to add context to this story. So when I was watching my dad out in the back, he was working on our sprinkler system out in our little yard, and he was sitting there trying to figure it out. And as I looked at him, I heard he won't be here next summer. And it was like the middle of summer. And of course, I was like, oh, what a horrible thought. Why would I ever think that? And there was no fear. It wasn't a fearful message at all. It was just sort of matter of fact. And even though I thought, oh, that's a horrible thing to think, that was me. Why was I think that? That's terrible. On a soul level, I knew it was true. And I knew it was something that was different than my own thoughts. I knew it was something different. But it was sort of a knowing and clairaudient at the same time. So fast forward to fall, he gets diagnosed with lung cancer that has spread. And then fast forward 4 more months to February, and he passed away very fast. But right before he passed, the months leading up to that, as he started to decline, my sisters and I started to chip in to help mom give her a break, help her with the daily duties and just be there for moral support. And we kind of all moved in shifts, and I was trying to take care of a 1-year-old at the same time. So, and I was working, like I said, as a singer on mostly the weekends and traveling. And so I was there as much as I could be. But as he declined, he was on hospice care at home, and we had put a hospital bed in the living room. And the night before he passed, and we had someone sleep in the living room with him so that if he passed, he wouldn't be alone. Somebody would be there. And so the night before he passed, I had that duty, or that was my shift. And I remember that night he was very restless, and he had a bar above his bed that he kept trying to pull himself up, and he kept trying to pull himself up. And every time he'd do that, I'd get up and walk over and say, Dad, are you okay? And he'd say, yeah, 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 you know, and he was for a couple of days, he really hadn't been himself and had not seemed like dad. You know, he just kind of was, um, you know, in and out of sleep a lot, and just he just seemed absent in a way. Um, and so I did that a number of times, and I was exhausted. We were all exhausted by this time, but I was exhausted because I had gone home to take care of Cassie, and I come back to do the shift, and he just kept. So I finally just thought, I'm just gonna bring a chair over and sit next to him, and so I kind of laid my head next to him on the bed, and I felt his hand tap my head, and he said, "Hun, you better go to bed. I'll be okay." And he sounded just like dad for just that split second. And so I said, okay, okay. So I went and laid down, and he finally went to sleep. And the next morning, he was sleeping, and I went home, and it was probably about maybe 9 or so in the morning. And I walked in the door and just fell to my knees and just sobbed. And Adam, of course, he kind of caught me, but he was just like shocked with his neck. And something happened in that moment, which I now know to be surrender. I was very controlling. I've come from controlling women, and my mom and her mom, a lot of fears, a lot of wanting to control everything in our atmosphere. Only I can clean the toilet right. Only I can do this right. You know, just very controlling of our atmospheres. And I realized I was up against something that I I couldn't control, and it as it as the need to control left me, it literally dropped me on the floor. That's how how uh, Im immersed and and determined I was to have control. And in that moment, it just left me, and it just left me a heap on the floor. And I knew I couldn't control this. Um, I went to sleep for a couple of hours, and then I got a call. I got a call. And calls coming in day and night were normal at this point. And they said, come back. And I would lived about 40 minutes away. So I got in the car, I drove in it, and within a couple of hours, he had passed when I got there. We were all there, my sisters and my mom. And he passed. And interesting thing, I was next to him, to his head, and I was kind of stroking his hair as he passed. And I could hear him saying something, and I kept looking where he was looking, because he was looking straight ahead and kind of up. And I kept trying, I was trying so hard because I knew he was seeing something. My gut, my knowing knew it was his dad. His dad died when he was 14. And there was something, I just knew he could see his dad. But I couldn't see it. I tried so hard to focus and just determine myself to see what he was seeing. But he passed, and he died that way, looking up. And I just remember thinking he can see his dad. So that day we started to plan the funeral, because we knew people would want to fly in. We had a lot of family in Utah and Wyoming and all over the place, and friends. He had a lot of friends, and he had a lot of like work colleagues and things like that that would want to come and be there. So we started to plan, and who needed to know and who would call and blah blah blah. And then fast forward to and that, you know, when you're getting ready for that, there's so much commotion. There's flowers coming, and there's people calling, and there's church people stopping by. It's very you know, kind of busy. which is kind of a good distraction, but it's also exhausting. You're exhausted as well. Our church brought in meals, which we were so thankful for, because otherwise we wouldn't have eaten, and wouldn't have the strength to make anything. So, but that's where you are. I had to sing at the funeral, and it was, my dad was my biggest fan, so I knew that I would have to, and I just have to muster the stoicness to do it, which I did. So the night before the funeral, once again, I was exhausted, and I went to bed probably around 9 or so, or maybe 10. And I was trying desperately to remember my lyrics. So I was doing that as I went to sleep. I was going over the lyrics of the songs as I went to sleep. And about 12, it was about midnight or maybe 12:30. I was laying down and I opened my eyes, and I kind of was looking where our window, there's a window next to our bed, and I was looking at the window, and as I opened my eyes, I saw Adam standing there, and he was, it was dark, but it looked like he was on the phone. Of course, you know how your eyes get adjusted to the dark because you lay in your bed, and so I could see him, and he had his hand up kind of like that. And it was back in the cell phone days, so greed is good, giant phones. So he had his hand up like this, and he kept he went out, he like looked out the window, and he had his hand up like this, and he was kind of, you know, walking kind of not pacing, but kind of walking back and forth. And he kind of turned around and walked this way, and it was so silent. And I kept thinking, why isn't he talking? What is going on? And I kept thinking, oh, somebody can't make it to the funeral, or they've had to move it back because we couldn't get the building, or something. I just felt like it was, I just thought, oh, probably something went wrong or whatever. Like I said, middle of the night phone calls have become a normal thing by then. So I was waiting and waiting, and I was watching him walk back and forth and look out the window and waiting and waiting. And finally I said, Adam. And I said it loud enough because I was like, what's going on? But I said, Adam. And Adam, my husband, sits up next to me. And in that moment, it was like the Spielberg camera. I'm like, what? I realized I'd been watching someone this whole time who was not my husband. And of course, my husband leapt out of bed and turned on the light. And as he turned on the light and the light came on, it was as if I lost focus. I lost it, right? It reminded me so much of those magic eye pictures where it's like a picture within a picture. It's like a whole bunch of little pixels, but then you can stare at it and you kind of shift your vision and you can see the picture within the picture. And then if you blink, you kind of lose it. That's what it was like. It was like I lost focus. And once I got my head around what it was, I said, I don't know who that was. And Adam was like, wouldn't it be your dad? And I was like, yes, but he was young. And but then when I thought about it, I'm like, of course it was my dad. I just had never seen him in the flesh young. He'd always looked older, but he was young. He was probably, Adam was 30 around, no, he was like 28 at the time. So he looked like a 28, 29, 30-year-old and built very much like my husband. My dad was always kind of, as I knew him, he was heavier set. He was like 6 feet tall, has solid build. My husband was really lean and 6 feet tall. And when my dad was that age, when he was younger, that's how he looked. He was very thin, really thin. We called him Frank Sinatra because he looked like thin as Frank Sinatra. But that's when I realized it was him, but he was young. And then I thought, why? But why was he on the phone? And then I realized it's the growth. He had a large growth on his neck. And I felt like he was like feeling it, or feeling that it wasn't there. And that felt right to me. And now I'm like, of course that's what it was. Of course that's what it was. But at the time, like I said, I was still in the church, and I wasn't very I was very religious and I was very spiritual, but I hadn't moved into like my abilities or anything like that, even though I was very, very sensitive. I hadn't really used my abilities or even realized I had like mediumship ability or anything like that. So I relayed the story to my sisters the next day, and it was interesting because they kind of believed me, but I think they did, but I think they also thought, why you? Why didn't he visit me? Maybe, I don't know. It was a little bit weird though, because I kind of felt like they believed me, but then I was like, do they, or they just think I'm crazy or whatever? But a couple of things happened in that experience. One was that after that, I knew. I didn't believe it. I didn't have faith, but I knew that we leave our body and go somewhere. I knew it. I did not think that there was no doubt in my mind at all after that. I didn't know what happened, and I didn't know exactly what, where, what we do or where we go or anything like that. It didn't answer any of those questions, but it showed me that we go on. So I knew that at that time. So that was different. And my life was different after that. The other thing was that moment of surrender, where I realized that surrender it really is a gift, and it's a letting go. It's a letting go of controlling the situation or being married to an outcome or thinking things should not be happening that are. I understood it fully, and I understood how we don't have to carry everything. We can let things go. Our guides are just waiting to take things off of us, burdens and the need to feel like we have to control everything and our fears and things like that. But a side effect of that surrender was that, so like I said, I was singing at the time when we were traveling a lot and getting on these smaller planes to go to Vegas or go to LA or go to Arizona or whatever. And I was terrified of flying. I had such a phobia. I'd had a couple of bad flights in a row in my early 20s. And since then, I was terrified of flying. And I was 30. Like I said, I was 30 years old. And after that, my fear of flying disappeared. I never had it again. And now I can get a little anxious, like anybody else, but it was a full-blown phobia. I mean, it terrified me. It was that control. It's that I don't have control and I don't even know how this plane is staying up and what's going, And so I was you wouldn't recognize me at that time. And I even told Cassie, I don't think you recognize me as that younger self because I was such a nervous Nelly, such a nervous Nelly. But after that, my fear of flying disappeared. And I didn't even understand what had happened, but it was that ability to surrender. Once you do it once and you know what it feels like and you know the benefits of it, it's easier to do. And it gets easier and easier and easier. What I also wanted to share was that my acceleration into my abilities really started to pick up steam. It was still very sporadic. So when people say like I get stuff, but I don't, but it's so it's just sporadic. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't know how to get the information when I ask for it. That's where I was at the time. Things were happening, but I didn't quite understand how to use my abilities and how to hone them and work on them and things like that. Like I said, I was still in the church, so I was still very religion minded and had that kind of dogma still. But my abilities really did pick up. And part of what I want to tell you is that when someone you love so much, and my dad and I were very connected. I didn't feel like I knew my dad that well because he was so quiet and he was uh, not very like emotionally or physically demonstrative, very much of that generation, that greatest generation that um, a little bit a little bit younger than the World War II generation, but that's how he was. But I was always very close to him and loved him so much. He was so kind. And but now I feel like we're besties. I feel like I know him so well. He helps me all the time in my work, all the time. He's helped me with orbs. And that was, so that was the first time I saw a spirit, but that's not the last time I saw him. I've seen him a couple more times, and when I do orbs and things like that. Um, but I wanted to say that when someone we love leaves, when someone we love so much leaves, we have this amazing opportunity for spiritual growth. Um, Not just in their passing, like we were talking about yesterday with Charlene about, you know, her having all these profound experiences with people passing away, that she's in the room, she's with them, she's with the family. Not just growth there, but growth afterwards in connecting. There's always that invitation open. Um, and they wait for us. They don't just take off. They wait for us. Um, and they check in on us regularly, even though some people are kind of like, I never feel my mother. I trust you. She's checking up on you. And she's probably tried to get through and tried to get in, but you haven't quite put the pieces together yet. A lot of times it's things like, I know that bird is my mom, but how would that be? Or why would I think that? Doesn't matter. If you have an experience like that, just say thank you. Hi, mom. Thank you. Because what happens is when you do that and you move into trust, they do it again and again and again. My dad sends dimes. And once my sister realized these dimes are coming from my dad, because she was the first one to realize that, everybody had a dime story after that. One was my nephew was in a stall in the bathroom, and he was the only one in there. And all of a sudden, he heard something drop on the floor, and it was like that metal drop. And he comes out, and there's a dime right as he opens the door. So how he does this, I don't know. There's probably lots of different ways that they do these things, but I know with animals and with birds and butterflies and things, it's an energy blending. And so they're kind of blending part of their energy with the animal, with the bird to kind of bring them with you. And that's why you recognize that energy. Um, but I always say, just say thank you. Even if you're not sure, just say thank you and open up that window to communicate, because they'll do it again. They'll keep doing it, and just and ask for it. That was great, mom. I got it. Do it again. Come back tomorrow. Come back the next day. Do it again. So so anyway, I just wanted to share this story, and I think I'm not sure why, but my guys have been asked after me to do it. So maybe some people are going through this, or need to hear something that will uplift them, or give them a little bit of hope, or whatever. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to me, and I will talk to you guys soon. All right, bye.